Have you ever noticed that while everyone around you seems to come alive in summer, you feel more like yourself when the temperature drops? That you don't just tolerate winter, you actually prefer it? Not because you love skiing or hot chocolate, but because something about the season itself feels more aligned with how you're wired. Most people assume this is just a preference, like choosing tea over coffee. Maybe you've even told yourself that. But psychologists who study seasonal behavior and nervous system regulation have found something more specific going on. Women who gravitate toward winter often share a particular psychological profile that has less to do with weather and more to do with how they process stimulation, expectation, and rest. This isn't about hating sunshine. It's about what happens to your nervous system when the world demands constant brightness. Here's what most people don't realize. Summer is culturally coded as the season of obligation. You're supposed to be social, spontaneous, energized, visible. You're supposed to say yes to invitations, wear less clothing, be in a good mood, make plans, and radiate availability. The pressure isn't always spoken, but it's there. Every beach photo on social media. Every "you have to enjoy this while it lasts" comment. Every expectation that good weather equals good mood. Winter, by contrast, gives you permission to contract, to stay in, to move slower, to say no without explanation. And for women who have spent years managing other people's needs, expectations, or emotional climates, that seasonal shift isn't just nice, it's regulatory. It's not about liking cold weather. It's about finally being allowed to match your external life to your internal state without having to defend it. Psychologists have found that people differ significantly in their tolerance for stimulation, a concept rooted in what's called sensory processing sensitivity. This isn't a disorder. It's a temperament trait found in about 20% of the population, and research shows it's slightly more common in women. Some nervous systems are built to seek novelty, noise, and interaction. Others are built to process deeply, notice subtleties, and regulate through quiet. Women who prefer winter often fall into the second category. Their brains are wired to notice more, feel more, and become overstimulated more quickly. Summer, with its heat, brightness, crowds, and social expectation, can feel like sensory flooding. Too many inputs, too much energy required to filter it all, too much performance needed just to exist in public spaces. Winter offers the opposite. Lower light, quieter streets, fewer demands to perform social energy you don't have. Neuroscience shows that highly sensitive nervous systems don't just prefer less stimulation. They actually function better in environments that allow for deeper processing and slower rhythms. What looks like preference is often regulation. But here's the part most people never connect. For many women, the preference for winter isn't just about stimulation. It's about escape from visibility. Summer makes you more observable. You're expected to show up in lighter clothes, at outdoor gatherings, in bright spaces where your mood, your body, and your energy are more exposed. Research on social conditioning and body image shows that women are hyper-aware of being looked at, and that this awareness increases cognitive load. It takes mental energy to manage how you're perceived, to monitor your appearance, to adjust your facial expressions, to perform the kind of easiness that summer supposedly represents. Winter reduces that load. Layers become armor. Darkness becomes privacy. Cold becomes a reason to stay home without having to justify it. You're not avoiding people. You're avoiding the exhausting performance of being perceived as available, happy, and fine when you're not. Here's what actually causes this. Women who prefer winter are often women who have spent much of their lives in caretaking roles, whether literal or emotional. They've been the ones managing social harmony, reading the room, adjusting their energy to match what's needed. Attachment research shows that people who grow up learning to prioritize others' comfort over their own often develop what's called hypervigilance to social cues. They become highly attuned to emotional atmospheres. They can sense tension before it's named. They adjust before being asked. And that attunement is exhausting. Summer amplifies it. More social interaction means more emotional labor. More togetherness means more monitoring. More visibility means more performance. Winter, by contrast, offers structural permission to stop. When the season itself contracts, you're allowed to contract too. The culture supports it. People expect you to hibernate. And for the first time in months, your nervous system gets to rest without guilt. This creates a particular kind of person. You're often deeply reflective. You notice things other people miss. You're comfortable with silence, solitude, and stillness in ways that make others uncomfortable. You don't need constant stimulation to feel okay. And in fact, Constant stimulation makes you feel worse. You've probably been told you're too serious, too quiet, or too sensitive. You've probably also been the person people come to when they need to be understood. Because your nervous system is built for depth, not speed. And winter is the only season that doesn't punish you for that. The cost, though, is that you spend half the year slightly out of sync with the culture around you. You're resting when others are accelerating. You're internalizing when others are externalizing. And because our culture rewards visibility, energy, and outward momentum, you can start to feel like something's wrong with you for not wanting what everyone else seems to want. There's another layer to this. Winter also offers something that summer actively discourages: the permission to feel complex emotions without having to resolve them immediately. Summer is the season of forced positivity. Everyone's on vacation. Everyone's having fun. If you're not, the contrast becomes glaring. You become the problem. Winter doesn't demand that. It makes space for melancholy, for introspection, for the kind of emotional weather that doesn't resolve neatly. Research on emotional regulation shows that people who are allowed to feel the full range of their emotions without pressure to fix them tend to have better long-term mental health. But our culture doesn't usually allow that. Summer certainly doesn't. Winter does. And if you're someone who's spent years being told to look on the bright side, to cheer up, to not be so heavy, winter might be the only season where your internal reality is allowed to exist without correction. Here's where it gets more complex. Preferring winter is adaptive when it allows you to honor your actual needs. When it gives you space to think, create, regulate, and exist without performance. When it helps you access the parts of yourself that get drowned out by noise and expectation. But it becomes costly when it's the only time of year you feel permitted to be yourself. When summer becomes something you have to survive rather than something you can move through with boundaries. When you spend half the year waiting for the other half to arrive so you can finally exhale. The question isn't whether you should prefer winter. The question is whether you've been conditioned to believe that your need for quiet, for slowness, for less, is only acceptable when the season agrees with you. Does winter feel like relief because it matches who you are, or because it's the only time you're allowed to stop pretending? Burnout research shows that people who chronically suppress their needs in service of social expectation eventually lose access to their own preferences. They stop knowing what they actually want because they've spent so long adapting to what's expected. If you prefer winter, it might be because winter is the one season where external permission aligns with internal need. But it's worth asking, what would it look like to give yourself that permission year-round? Not to become someone else. Not to suddenly love summer. But to stop treating your nervous system like it's wrong for needing what it needs. To stop apologizing for the fact that you regulate through contraction instead of expansion. To stop waiting for the world to go quiet before you allow yourself to be quiet too. Awareness doesn't mean fixing this. It means understanding that your preference for winter is information. It's telling you something about how you process the world, how you've learned to manage visibility, and what your body needs in order to feel safe. It's not a flaw. It's not antisocial. It's not depression, unless it is. And even then, the seasonal pattern is still worth understanding. You're not avoiding life by preferring the season that lets you breathe. You're just noticing that life, as it's currently structured, doesn't make much room for people who regulate through stillness instead of stimulation. And that noticing, that awareness, is where real choice begins. Not the choice to be different, but the choice to stop pathologizing what's always been true. If this resonated, the next video might explain what happens when you stop apologizing for needing less than everyone else seems to need.